Hey there, y'all.
I was gonna say good morning, but it's like not that at all. Here it's 1 o'clock. Hi, Keyan. Happy,
Hey, hey, Caitlin.
happy Trump isn't gonna be our president anymore. Probably day.
Oh, that is definitely one load off of my mind. At least we don't have to deal with an overt racist, sexist, fascist in the Oval Office. Um, but it is not as comforting as so much of the other stuff that's going on, and seeing people on the streets taking office or taking charge and really demanding that they be heard.
That's the next step. People out in the streets and then taking office.
Right.
um, hey, so everybody, you're listening to Making Sense with Move to Amend. And for those of you who don't know about Move to Amend, we are a campaign to amend the US Constitution to end corporate constitutional rights or corporate personhood and get money out of politics and to end corporate rule over our government. That's our true agenda, and to make democracy for once in the United States. So we are here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, and we kind of trade off who from our team. So I moved to a men's national director. I'm in Mesa, Arizona right now, but I live in Sacramento. And Keyan, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yep, yep. My name is Keyan. I am the grassroots director for the Move to Men Coalition, and I am based out of Sacramento as well.
So we can talk about whatever you all want to talk about. Obviously, we're going to focus a good amount on the election this week because not a whole lot of other stuff happened, or if it did, we won't know about it till later. It's buried, but we can talk about that from whatever angle you want to. So feel free to make comments at any point, and put this on your calendar. Stay tuned for whenever we go live. If you're doing YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to our channel, and we just make sense of the week. And this week, there's a lot to make sense of. I have a lot of stuff to say about this that maybe isn't quite
Uh,
all Move to Amend centric, but we can maybe get to that in a little bit. I think we should talk a little. We should start off, I think, with sharing the Move to Amend related election news, which we don't have as much as we have had in some other years. But there were 3 initiatives on the ballot, 2 in Wisconsin, 1 in Ohio. Keyan, you want to talk about like what our resolutions are and do and how they work?
Absolutely. So, Move to Men, we have been for the past 10 years, or actually 11 years now, working to lobby our elected representatives in Congress, as well as pass local resolutions at the city, state, or city and county level, as well as the state level, trying to put pressure from the ground up on our elected officials to let them know that mass constituencies, millions of people, want them to take action on the We the People amendment, which would make clear corporations are not people and money is not speech. The local resolutions that are being passed at the local level basically are calling for their members of Congress from their constituencies in their states to take action on this amendment as well. And some of them are actually binding ordinances that actually keep this in the public consciousness going forward, such as creating what were known as Constitution Days in some constituencies like Ohio.
Democracy Days, you mean?
Democracy Days, yes, Democracy Days. But yeah, these are resolutions that we've helped pass more than 650 resolutions, a total of over 800 local resolutions passed across the country in the last 11 years. And we're hoping to continue to build that ground floor pressure. And we just had some major victories that, Kaitlin, you can probably talk about in Ohio and Wisconsin.
Yeah, so there were 3 that were on the ballot on Tuesday. It was a little bit hard year to collect signatures because of COVID-19. And so It wasn't a strategy that we were putting a lot of resources into or encouraging, but the awesome folks in Painesville, Ohio collected signatures anyways. Their ballot initiative passed by 78%. Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin passed an initiative by 84%, and then Winnebago County in Wisconsin passed a resolution calling for the We the People Amendment by 83%. And it's worth noting that in every single one of these jurisdictions, the same people who were in the voting booth or turning in their ballots for these initiatives were also in majority voting for Trump for president. So like we have seen every other time that these initiatives have been run in conservative communities, you know, I mean, how many people could get elected with 84% of the vote? Nobody. Nobody in the United States of America, unless the person you were running against was dead, which was actually what happened in one race in, what was it, North Dakota, South Dakota? Somebody running for Congress who had already passed away from COVID, actually. So it's just, it's unheard of. But this issue continues to be the one that people can agree on across the board. And although, interestingly enough, kind of maybe to segue to some of the other bigger issues, I don't know if you saw this, Keyan, but Fox News did an exit poll of their listeners after Election Day. So these are going to be like the most conservative voters, because it's people who voted on Election Day, which was majority Trump folks, and then also Fox News listeners. And the question was, you know, would you support a government-run healthcare, which is also like said in the way to be, you know, most leading in terms of what kind of response? And over 70% of the respondents said that they did support it. It was like 36% strongly, and then about that many supported it tacitly. So actually, I would say, you know, one of the big things coming out of this election in terms of analysis, there's so much wrong information out there. Democrats at the national leadership level are putting out the message that, you know, talking about Medicare for all, talking about defunding the police and reining in out of control police departments are both losing messages, when in fact, you know, polling shows otherwise. People getting in the streets on these issues shows otherwise. And the main thing, my biggest takeaway from, you know, in terms of what is happening at the national level around, you know, who's elected to Congress, the Senate, and even the fact that Biden barely is going to squeak by, is that our two main political parties are totally out of touch with the American people. People were willing to turn out in big numbers to defeat a authoritarian fascist, but there is definitely no mandate on the part of either political parties can actually, with a straight face, in all honesty, claim. Now they're both going to claim it, but I think that they're really wrong, and we will have to organize over the next 4 years to build up a base of people power. Otherwise, we need to be very worried about what the next presidential election will bring in terms of options. Maybe even one of them will be Trump again.
Right.
Like, he could run again.
That's the real possibility of this all, right? Is like, even if Biden ends up winning, Trumpism, fascism, if you want to call it, or like, you know, to call it that, is not like, was not repudiated. There was no resounding victory for Biden in this race. The fact that like all these pollsters in both parties were projecting this, you know, massive Democratic wave really just kind of shows, one, the fallacy of trusting polling of very limited sample sizes over and over again, especially coming from the same areas, and two, the profound disconnect between the national political establishment and the grassroots communities that actually comprise their supporter base. it really just speaks volumes to like that. Not only is do Democrats have their work cut out for them when it comes to going in and undoing the damage that Trump and his corporate establishment has already wrought, but it's also going to be like, they're going to have a hard time just convincing the American people to keep them in power in the next 4 years. We're already seeing, that their majority in the House is chipped away, and there is no guarantee. Like it's very, very unlikely that they're going to win the runoff races for Senate that could give them the control of the Senate, and that's going to be
right. Well, which is almost probably a perfect situation if you're a Democratic candidate who promised the elites that nothing was going to change. Because what better way to make sure that you're not responsible for doing anything than being able to blame it all on Mitch McConnell or whoever the heck on the Republican side, which is what we know that Democrats do beautifully. And so the rest of us are going to need to figure out how to, starting as soon as we maybe take like a little bit of a breather. Obviously, we still have the pandemic to deal with. And that would be my main point, is like these two parties left us out to dry now for I guess the pandemic didn't start in January. So what is that? 7, 8, 9 months or whatever it is. And they have nothing to show for it. We still have a devastated economy. We have, a completely woefully inadequate and violent healthcare situation in terms of the lack of coverage, and millions of people out of work, millions of people about to be out of their homes and already out of their homes. And neither party did anything to take care of any of that. Didn't prioritize public health or the well-being of the electorate. We dutifully showed up more people than ever before, young people and people of color, again, delivered the removal of Trump. But this is not like a celebratory moment, because we're still completely screwed. And that's part of why this is a Move to Amend platform, so I'm not going to take a lot of time to talk about this, but I think we really seriously need to be looking at how can we possibly be continuing to support a party that is supposedly for social justice but can't deliver it ever, doesn't fight for it ever, and is an abject failure even at winning under their strategy. The Democrats went right and it completely failed. And yet here we are a couple days after the election, and they're all talking about how that is what they need to double down on. And supposedly that's going to help them, to take power in 2022. And it's always down the road at some point. Maybe we'll get there. And then even when they do, they have nothing to show for it. It's like, how long are we as a public going to stand for that? When your leadership sucks, you're supposed to fire them. These people are still in charge and making just as much money, taking the paycheck, getting the great health care. And, when Republicans and the worst thing that would happen is like Republicans would take charge and, then they'd get bigger tax cuts. Like, this is not sustainable, especially doesn't give a shit about what election is going on or what we're busy doing and occupied with, and it's just going to keep on coming at us. So what are we going to do about it?
True story. I mean, the race for president, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, is just it's just par for the course. It's really not that important in the grand scheme of things compared to the down ballot races and the converging crises that we have consistently been dealing with. And it really, the results that we're seeing right now at all levels of this election cycle really goes to show that both parties, Democrats, Republicans, are two sides of the same coin that are losing its value and being passed between the same corporate hands. And if you're if you're looking for key examples of that, look no further than California, where not only was the races in in an established Democratic stronghold very close to call for some of the incumbent Democrats, but the ballot races, the state ballot measures were absolute that were on the ballot this year. Really, we dropped the ball. Frankly, there was no strong Democrat support for progressive measures from Proposition 14 through Proposition 19. We ended up allowing mega tech corporations in Uber and Lyft to exempt their employees, their workers, from being covered and given employee benefits like everybody else is. And that is a profound loss, considering that a lot of people don't realize that it was one of the most expensive ballot races in
No, it was the most expensive ballot initiative in the history of history. And
right.
It was entirely financed by the companies that stood to benefit from it. Companies that at the same time as they were spending hundreds of millions of dollars to buy the initiative are claiming that they can't afford to pay their workers to guarantee a minimum wage, to guarantee healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And they told voters a whole bunch of lies about how, we needed that initiative in order to ensure flexibility, because everybody is out there having to have a side hustle because otherwise they can't pay their freaking rent. And so, yeah, in California, supposedly one of the most progressive states in the country, we were duped because of the money, which is, comes back to why we need the We the People amendment. It used to be that corporations were prohibited from contributing money to any ballot initiatives, because obviously the only reason why a company is going to get involved in a ballot initiative is because they have a financial stake in it. And what kind of democracy is that if one side is trying to buy access to voters so that then they can go around laws that have been passed to try and protect, whether it's the environment or in this case, worker health and safety. And so that was a total loss, totally terrible. And I just found out this morning, somehow I hadn't seen this and it didn't really come out, even though there was an LA Times article about it, about how Kamala Harris's brother-in-law was actually the guy who was running the campaign for Uber on Prop 22. So it's like these folks are all part of a small cabal of people who stand to benefit from a system that doesn't benefit the vast majority of us. And that is an untenable situation. And we also are in a very dangerous dynamic in that the Democratic Party has tried very, very, very hard to make clear that they're the party of the elites, which left the door open, and thank goodness it didn't work this time, but it left the door open for Trump to claim to be the party of the working people. And when you are screwing working people over top to bottom, and you have an authoritarian fascist that's able to rightfully critique the other power holders and who are positioning themselves overtly and explicitly as the party of the elite, then that's how you end up with an incredibly dangerous situation like, a fascist Nazi Germany. And we are teetering right there. And we got a little bit of a by the a hair. We didn't fall over the cliff yet, but
we haven't pulled back from the cliff either, right?
Right, exactly. We're right on that cliff, and all of that messaging, all of that racial dog whistling, all of the extreme hatred towards immigrants, etc., is all out there in the culture, and the Democratic Party has done nothing to stop it, except for smugly paint rainbows all over themselves.
The very candidates that are likely to win, Biden and Kamala, are part of that. They directly contributed to that throughout their careers. Kamala Harris was the top prosecutor in California and in the Bay Area. before she went to Congress. Biden helped to champion the criminal justice reforms during the Clinton eras that led to and has exacerbated the problem of mass incarceration in this country. So like at the end of the day, no matter who gets into the White House, we really need to remember we cannot take any single one of these elected officials, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, at their word. We have to actually be in the street and ready to hold them accountable at every step of the way, everything that they say. And that's why we're seeing people not just resting on their laurels and just throwing up a sigh of relief. It's like, oh, Biden's going to win. Our problems are over. Our problems are just beginning. And and we are still, again, in a pandemic where hundreds of thousands of people are dying. We just had more than 100,000 people infected with COVID or test positive for COVID in the last 24 hours, a record across the world. It's running out of our coronavirus pandemic is running out of control right now. And even if Biden ends up being declared the winner, we still have to deal with this fascist regime that's in the White House right now until January 20th. So we can't, unfortunately, we can't afford to take a break at this moment. And we have to be remembering what's at stake at the moment and save as many people as we can and help as many people as we can.
And even though I think that it is important that we take stock and not try to gloss over, there are, I appreciate what Sandy is saying right here, that progressive candidates who ran on progressive platforms, on platforms of social justice, on platforms of workers' rights, on addressing climate change, not just acknowledging that it's real, but not going to do anything about it, but actually saying that we have to aggressively try and reverse climate collapse, did much better than candidates that tried to, veer towards the middle and talk out of both sides of their mouth and not offer anything to anybody. The reality is that in general elections, those candidates do better. In Democratic primary elections, those candidates have a really hard time because the Democratic Party is busy undermining their efforts while they're trying to win. So there is, I think that there's a lot of potential to organize the American people on these issues, but of course, corporate media is a challenge and a block on that, but it's not, it doesn't matter. We're going to have to figure out how to organize despite that. Issues like money in politics or greater democracy, like Move to Amend is fighting for, are incredibly popular across the board. I think it was really encouraging that, a $15 minimum wage, which is, the bare minimum, won in Florida, despite the fact that the Florida Democratic Party wouldn't fight for it and wouldn't endorse it. And therefore, that campaign won in Florida when Joe Biden didn't. And we also have, a few more members of Congress who were elected, who, endorsed or took the pledge to amend, our pledge to amend, committing to support the We the People amendment when they get there, like Cori Bush and a number of state office holders as well across various states. And so, we will continue to move this forward, but I think we really need to also use this opportunity to talk about all the ways that the system, is either rigged against us. You could kind of take that analysis, or say that it's broken, but was built broken and never really worked, but is the system is the problem. A lot of people talking about how the Electoral College, we need to get rid of the Electoral College, for sure. And also, we're seeing a lot of interesting conversation about, critiques of the Constitution in some fundamental ways, really starting to talk about that in a way that, certainly has never been something that people were willing to entertain during my life because of the, holy esteem that the Constitution is held up in. But it's like, well, if it's so great, then why is our country such a freaking failed state? How does that work?
Right. Oh my goodness, yeah. Like, I mean, it speaks volumes when we're declared this bastion of democracy around the world when we don't even have direct votes of our national leader, our public face to the world. It's literally chosen. Like, our vote is advisory at the national level. So we don't have a direct input on who actually becomes president. However, that doesn't diminish the power of our vote in the down ballot races that are significantly much more important. And by and large, the fact that it took a pandemic to really make it so that more people could actually have access to the political process than we have had in more than a century, actually. And it shows too in certain races, like here in Sacramento County, the fact that we had a couple of good races, good ballot measures that were. I'm sorry. Um, we had ballot measures that were being pushed by a Democratic Party establishments or Democratic political figures or whatnot that claim as the Democrats that were trying to centralize more power for themselves in favor of real estate developers that did actually were defeated. And a couple of other close races too that are down to the wire, down to just a couple of thousand votes because there were so many people that were sending in mail-in ballots and such. So it really goes to show, even if this system isn't broken, it is fixed, and our vote is rigged in favor of the two-party system. It's still that much more important to participate within the process because not participating essentially consigns you to the worst possible scenario. Even when you were not choosing, we're choosing. So if all we have is to fill in a circle and send in some postage on our ballot, then that really does go a long way in just keeping us from the brink of utter disaster and really moving the ball forward. Think of elections not as a winner take all, but really as just a chess game in a long-term strategy game going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it is sobering how almost half of the country, was willing to vote for Trump. There's that too, or not half the country. We still don't have the majority of people voting.
Yeah,
of registered voters, half the country was willing to do that. So, but I think there's a lot of mixed. I mean, one thing that people have been looking at is like, well, why did he gain more women voters and people of color? And, it's like, that's what happens when there's nowhere to go and there's two options. And, you've got one who's sort of dangling the, just like a lot of, I think what people respond to with Trump is like complete lack of respect he has for the system, which,
right.
is something that people feel and it does resonate. I mean, there's no question that there's also a tremendous amount of like racism too. And that's something that we have to like educate and organize and overcome as a country. And part of doing that means actually taking a look at how we got here and how this country was based on and rooted in white supremacy. And so it's not a surprise that we're here now. And, what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do to reconcile that, take responsibility from that instead of just kind of like try to sidestep it and act as though that's not part of what is the DNA of the United States. But at the same time, when you have such an out of touch elite and you've got somebody who is up there thumbing his nose at the system, even though he benefits from the system too, but he's done an excellent job of playing this character. Like that's not the case. Then, and you've got two options. It's not a big surprise that in pretty large numbers, there are also people who would go with just the F you, let's just torch this shit solution. Because the other side basically just has a bunch of tisks and smug, we're here for you, but we have nothing to prove it.
it feels like a popularity contest every time that we run this presidential gamut. Like it's we're not we even during the debates we didn't have like concrete, substantive discussions on policies or principles that we wanted to bring into the office. It was really just about he's worse than the other guy is worse than me. You should vote for me. And that's not inspiring to the vast majority of people in this country who,
especially when the bad
especially young people.
Well, the bad stuff that they were each saying about each other was freaking true. So it's like,
right.
Neither one
it's
of
like,
them are
come
wrong.
on.
Yes, you're terrible, and yes, so are you.
Right. I think a lot of the problems that Democrats are seeing in the down ballot races is that like a lot of the candidates they put out were not giving inspiring messages. It was really just about like we need to beat Trump. We need to, stop these Republicans who are taking away your rights and values or whatnot. But it really, at the end of the day, I mean, what what alternatives did they actually offer to people to actually inspire them to turn out and to give change a chance, And I think that's what a lot of people are really looking for right now.
Well, and I think the main thing people were looking for is where am I going to get relief to make sure that I can pay the rent, to make sure that if I get sick, which is imminently possible more than any other time in my life because there's a freaking pandemic outside, whether, how am I going to pay for that? And how am I going to pay for food when I don't have a job or when my job is very precarious? And and neither one of the presidential candidates and then most of the people running for Congress had nothing to say about that to speak of, because they were trying to avoid talking about it for the last 6 months when they didn't do anything about it. And so that's still what we have to deal with, because all of those conditions, all of those economic conditions, all of those health conditions are there's nothing that has changed about those. But I do think that, like the good news is that we actually can build systems of solidarity to support each other against neoliberalism. It's not a like sustainable fight in the long run because they keep on gouging out more and more and more from us, but we can somewhat defend each other. That's harder to do when we're in an authoritarian like crackdown situation, which, I don't know that we're guaranteed that that's not going to also come from the Democratic side at some point. But so far, that has more been something that has come from the right in an overt way. Certainly Obama helped put things in place to make it possible legally for Trump to do some of the things that he did do that weren't illegal. But on the whole, that's where we need to turn to now, because the reality is we're still in a situation where our government, the people who are in charge of our government, have no interest in protecting us or taking care of us or solving these problems. And so we need to figure out how to protect each other in the short term. And then we need to figure out how we're going to build a movement to take power from these. Okay.
I call most of them what they are, fascist, a lot of them, and then if not like, they're sympathizing with fascism. Let's be clear. Donald Trump was not the problem of the last 4 years. He was a symptom of a deeper dysfunction within our democracy. And there's plenty of blame to go around to both sides of the aisle. It was Democrats that enabled Trump to actually take office and get to this position, use the power of the office to to detain people indefinitely for no other reason than trying to seek asylum or to come to the United States in search of better lives. There's no it was Democrats who enabled the criminal justice system to basically round up and be used as a weapon to punish people for simply exercising their First Amendment rights, and locking up people for petty charges and trumping those up. So at the end of the day, we can't stop for a moment. That's why we're seeing more what's giving me hope personally is seeing more grassroots organizations forming coalitions, coming together across their respective issue communities to actually talk about what our shared vision of the world, of the world that we want and deserve, really looks like, and really thinking about concrete strategic steps on how to get there. Which is something that we at Move to Mend have been doing for a long time. And we just recently had a conversation around that just a couple weeks ago with our People's Movement Assembly on envisioning a People's Constitution. I really appreciate some of you, reminding us of the ideas that have come up, such from FDR's Second Bill of Rights, the need to really rein in the corporate consolidation of mass media and such. Like, we really need those ideas now more than ever to be brought to the forefront, but we need to really build in solidarity with one another. We have to organize across our respective issue communities and understand how interconnected our root problems really are, because at the end of the day, we need to really be thinking about the root problems, not these simple, disagreements on social issues, perhaps, but really look to what is driving these divisions, because a lot of it has been set, unfortunately, from the beginning, from our founding culture that put property rights and profit over basic human rights and well-being. And that continues to permeate every level of our institutions and every facet of our society. And the reason that we have half of the registered electorate voting for a openly fascist, racist, sexist candidate is because of that. Is because of that that culture or whatnot that we still have not reconciled with. We haven't actually had a national conversation on white supremacy. We haven't had a national conversation on cis heteropatriarchy, sexism. We haven't had a national conversation yet around rampant unchecked classism that's coming in, with capitalism being at the core of our class's oppression. So we really need to be willing to have those bold conversations and not just hunker down and double down on things that we have been raised in from our orthodoxies, even from birth.
Well, and the divide and conquer, right. By making sure that only a tiny minority of people are recognized as human beings legally and having human rights, and then pitting everyone else against each other, doling out some to some populations, and then making sure that that's at the expense of marginalizing others. Like, we are a very wounded and mentally ill country, and that needs to be addressed. We need to go through that trauma that we have and reconcile it, and then get past it. In terms of the policies, though, that would help alleviate the suffering or move us towards away from a climate collapse and things like that, those solutions are actually out there. That's one of the things that always makes me feel more hopeful too, is it's not like we need to put our heads together to come up with what would work better. We need to actually withhold our power from anybody who is offering us anything less than the real solutions. That's the trick that we need to figure out how to solve. It isn't that we have to come up with it. It's that we have to stop being willing to accept anything less than that from people who are telling us that we can't do that, meanwhile robbing us out the back door, and colluding together to do that and pretending like they're not on the same friggin' side. And so, that's what I really hope that this last election and maybe even a Trump presidency was sort of the beginnings to help make all of this bear. Because the big thing about America or the United States is our ability to be delusional about ourselves, right? I mean, we have been propagandized and indoctrinated with this idea that we're the best country in the world, that we're the most
American
democratic country in the
exceptionalism.
world, that, you know, democracy began in Philadelphia. I mean, these are things that people believe because these are things that we say over and over and over again in all kinds of subliminal and, overt messages, but also in subconscious and small messages of American exceptionalism. And that makes it very hard for us to like see clearly, to actually understand what's going on. And it makes it very easy for us to be manipulated and used. And nobody likes that. You know, that's not a state that is actually like a sustainable state for human beings to be in. And so something's got to give. And I'm glad that, you know, we'll see what happens this weekend. I hope that there isn't like some kind of violence that erupts. It does seem as though, in a way, because Republicans actually won the Senate, it makes it really hard for the Republican Party to get behind Trump on this idea that the ballots are all fake. Because it's
right.
like, well, then why didn't people vote for Democrats in the Senate? They only just are fake on the presidential bubble. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So the rest of the Republican Party is a little bit is trying to rein him in. And so he's probably going to be out sort of high and dry on his own in terms of like the people in government. And that will go a long way, I think, towards moving us along. But we cannot, as Keyan and I have been saying over and over, and all of those of you who have been commenting too have been saying, like, we cannot just try to go back to normal. Normal is an entirely fucked up state in the United States of America. So, like, turn away from that.
whatever thought we had about normalcy before COVID-19, I will refuse to go back to that. My personal, like me personally, like from here on out, we really need to focus in on the root problems, and I'm not going to settle for anything less than widespread systemic change that happens. Like, and that starts at the, like, you know, that starts from the ground up. And also demands new leadership, particularly younger leadership from folks that are inheriting this mess of a country that we're currently dealing with right now. And like, you know, a lot of Move to Men supporters I know have been involved in social justice work and grassroots organizing for much of their lives, and many of them are, you know, have established themselves. You know, many, we have a number of people who continue to do the work even after they've retired. And you know, like to those of you that are still engaged in this and still fighting the good fight, like, all I can encourage you is to really get behind youth organizers, these youth-led movements and issues from like Sunrise and so many others that are really, like, you know, picking up the baton that have come before from you all as revolutionaries and the revolutionaries beforehand. Because at the end of the day, you know, many of us are not going to be around to really see the lasting impacts of this moment.
Keyan, you're not that old.
I know. I'm 35. I'm actually getting beyond the 18 to 35 category right now. So, you know, it's I'm right. But like there are so many youth organizers that have popped up. Like here in Sacramento, we're seeing more young people take to the streets than I have seen since moving here. And
that's
like
awesome.
It's really inspiring. I think I feel as though you know, the colloquial saying or you know, the common saying of, you know, the kids will be all right. I think the kids will be all right as long as our parents and grandparents don't kill us first. You know, I think that's like really the key thing to it. So really, you know, encouraging y'all to really examine your current analysis on, you know, the current state of things and really look to young people, not just for their energy, but for their leadership and their input in particular.
Yeah, well, and in their leadership is a great way to put it in terms of get behind them and just back them. You know,
Right. Yeah, and
certainly nothing that we've been doing has been going well. So, you know, whether we're talking about progressive movements or the country, the mainstream, you know, governance of the country, like fail, 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 fail. So let's let some people who haven't been part of making the fail do it. And, you know, you can certainly help them along the way with, you know, things that there's wisdom in having been around for a minute, but
right.
not if you think that because what you've been doing is going to work, because we have no evidence of that. We just really don't. I really think that, like, 2020, I don't know, maybe it means something that it's like hindsight's 2020 vision. Like 2020 needs to be about us stopping, seeing what we want to see, and seeing what's actually really here, and then dealing with what that is, not what we wish was the case and what would be nice or would say nice things about us as a country or as movements or as leaders ourselves, but like being real. And then carrying on from there. And so for anybody who wasn't able to participate in our People's Movement Assembly on looking toward a People's Constitution, we are going to be putting together a new website that will be a place for that discussion to continue. And we invite you to sign up now to let us know if you're interested in that project. I mean, we're going to continue to work on the We the People Amendment because that is an essential piece of policy that until we put it in place, we will not be able to seize power over our government from corporations that run it. But the reality is that they do already run it. And the reality is that they're not going to just let us put this amendment in place or, you know, remove their constitutional rights. I mean, the Supreme Court that we have now is worse, obviously, than it was a few months ago, but they've been on this path for generations. And so they're going to keep on going at it. And really what the We the People Amendment provides is an entry point into a powerful conversation to help Americans see that this is a systemic problem, not a problem about like which party is in charge or which guy is on the bully pulpit of the presidential office. And, you know, frankly, I don't know that we're going to get that many more members of Congress in terms of the makeup of who's currently in Congress to get on board with this. But we can organize a movement for power to ultimately remove them and put in place people who, you know, will put the vision forward that we need. So that means we got to get clear on what that vision is. We got to get clear on what those policies are and how we want them implemented. And then we have to fight for power. So, but I actually, I think we're close to kind of an hour, which is around when we do. Although if there's anything in particular that anybody wants to ask us or that you want to speak to that we haven't yet, feel free to. Thanks, Alfonso, for continuing to put up people's comments so we can see what people are saying. It sounds like, you know, this conversation so far is resonating with the people who are listening. But if you want to take it in a little bit of a different direction, now's the time. But I do want to give a shout out to some of our grassroots organizers who just this week, even though everybody was focused on elections and counting ballots and all that sort of stuff, had a meeting with Jackie Spear, who is a representative from the Bay Area and had been a former co-sponsor of the We the People Amendment, and I guess had some changes in staff, which caused us to not be able to get through to her office over these last 2 years since the new Congress or since this current Congress. But she has a new staff member who was very responsive, and our folks had a great meeting. And so she's not on there yet, but when Congress comes next back into session, we will have a new co-sponsor. So we have reached 75 co-sponsors on the We the People Amendment, which is great because that was our goal for the year. And in a crazy year where going to Washington, D.C. and lobbying your representative was really just like not available on the to-do list. We still were able to grow, and we will continue, to do that. We have a little bit of time left, and now that the election is over, this is a great opportunity for you to virtually storm into your representative's office on a Zoom call and tell them that they need to sign up as well. Because part of what is going to be necessary for us to take power from these folks is that we have to make them take a position and make clear which side they're on. We cannot allow them to continue to talk out of both sides of their mouth, to run on a campaign of being against money in politics, but then not support the constitutional amendment that will actually solve that problem. Or, and you can use that with any issue, to not talk about, climate change and then take money from fossil fuel corporations. I'm talking about you, Joe Biden, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so part of it is holding them accountable and making them name where they're at. And then it is pressuring them and ultimately replacing them when they're on the wrong side. And then the ones that are good need to be held to a higher standard than we even hold the good ones to, because we let them get away with a hell of a lot as well. Mm-hmm. And just not being willing to actually fight. I mean, I continue to be incredibly disappointed isn't even the right word, just appalled at the Congressional Progressive Caucus and the fact that they had nothing to offer us in terms of pandemic relief. And they had nothing to offer in terms of leverage, even though that is one of the biggest caucuses in Congress, and they weren't able to fight for us at all. So we can't let them get away with that.
Not at all. I mean, we need to really hold our our elected officials feet to the fire on this, and hold them to their word. We can't trust them at face value to do right on our behalf. We have to really make them do that. And the only way we can do that is by building grassroots movements, people power to really do that. And the success of getting Jackie Speer to re-sign on after all this time is entirely due to the grassroots pressure that came from her office and to really push her, put her on that point to stay true to her word. Exactly. And we have to continue to do that into the next Congress. We're going to reintroduce. We're looking to reintroduce the We the People Amendment, and it's something that we're going to need to recruit all of these 75 co-sponsors back on board. So if you live in one of their constituencies, be ready on January 21st to remind them We the People Amendment is coming back. Where we need you to stay true to it and be back on there. There was one
start
question.
Start right now.
Right.
Don't need to wait until January.
Don't even wait. We sit it's not the change of the cycle yet, and we can still get more co-sponsors on board, particularly Karen Bass's district down in Los Angeles County. If you live if Karen Bass is your congresswoman, definitely want to encourage you to contact her office to make clear she needs to re-sign on to the We the People Amendment like she did in the 115th Congress. There was one question that I thought was particularly interesting. I know we're kind of limited on time, but I wanted to follow up with. It was from, where was it? Michael, I'm sorry, I thought I had it with me.
You lost it? Well, there's a question from Jessica specifically to you.
Oh, curious about my thoughts about the demands of Black Lives Matter and defunding police with Harris in the White House. How do you think running a cop as vice president has impacted that demand? Yeah, I honestly, from my personal opinion, did not think highly of Kamala Harris because of her background as one of the top cops, and she has a history too, not just of back in the blue, so to speak, in terms of not really going after police officers that murder people of color for petty offenses, but also for her how she handled immigrant cases as well, immigrant deportation cases and stuff like that. It's honestly, I think that like we can't expect Harris to actually do right on behalf of the movement for Black Lives. I don't see her putting serious push or energy or political power of her platform behind the movement to reinvest from police and put them back into community-based care. And that's why we, as a whole, need to mobilize, and continue to mobilize, get behind the movement for Black Lives, and so many other Black-led organizations that are fighting for racial justice. We at Move to Amend for a long time have been very clear to state that corporate rule depends upon oppression, races along lines of race, gender, and class. And it depends upon throwaway classes of people, particularly people of color, who must suffer and struggle in order to maintain the comforts of the powerful. That's why we as a movement, as a coalition, can't just make anti-oppression work as just part of our campaign or just pay it lip service. It has to actually be our campaign. And whatever movement that you're involved in, that's focusing in on these systemic issues like we are, it's really critical to center the shared realities of people of color, women, queer and trans folks, as well as the poor, in any vision for a more democratic, representative future, or a genuine progressive community. Because at the end of the day, those voices were always left out from the beginning. We need to actually bring they know. People of color know how to dismantle the police. We know how to defund the police. What we need is backers. We need people to actually just get behind their leadership, our leadership, and making that a reality, and push our elected officials, Kamala Harris on down, to actually get behind us and represent our will, our shared will as a people.
Well, maybe that would be a good place to leave it for today. But you can get in touch with us at movetoamend.org. We would love to work with you and connect with you if we don't already. Thanks for tuning in. We do this show every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. It rotates who's on. So I think next week will be Millie, our outreach coordinator, along with Daniel, who's one of our board members. And we will, recap the week and riff on what is going on. If you have things that you think we should know about that happen, feel free to get in touch with us through the social media channel that you're on. And is there anything else that you want to add, Keyan?
Yeah, I would just remind folks, to continue the ongoing political education, especially within this current moment. Definitely check out the movement education program. It's been revamped, and honestly, it is a really great. It provides really great analysis and reading and education on on what solidarity organizing looks like and why it's so critical to this work that we're doing. So I really want to encourage people to continue doing that. And look to the organizations that are really honing in on these systemic issues. There are a number of different grassroots organizations, from Sunrise Movement to the Movement for Black Lives, that are offering concrete proposals and solutions to these systemic problems of white supremacy, cis heteropatriarchy, and classism, and just rampant environmental destruction that need our support. So really look to what grassroots orgs are operating in your area, what solutions they're bringing to the table, and just participate, provide support in any way that you can. There are groups groups that I'm involved with, like Anti-Police Terror Project, that are working to create alternative models that don't involve the police terrorizing communities, all for the sake of protecting property. And also, there are groups that are creating participatory budgeting processes, like I encourage you to check out the participatory budgeting process that are creating these processes that are democratizing our economic decisions, and so many others that are doing great work. So really want to encourage you all to look through that. And I see
Awesome.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, please don't forget to support Move to Amend. A lot of people have been very focused on the executive branch of the United States government for the last 4 years, and really 4 years before that. And so, the systemic, long-term, but actually, fundamental change, groups that have been working on that, groups like Move to Amend, that are not just jumping into whatever is the current issue that everybody is panicking about. Some of that legit panic and sometimes manufactured, have had trouble staying here. So we're still here because we're committed to this, and we're going to see it through, and frankly we'll see it through whether we can do that paid or not. But when our staff have had to be furloughed and look for other work in order to pay the bills, that means all of our work slows down. And nobody is in this to make money or even to make a retirement. But it makes a really big difference when you're having to do 3 different things, 2 of which to help make sure that you're going to be able to put food on the table and make rent, etc., versus being able to focus on this and support our volunteers full time. And so our monthly donors are key, and that is the most effective way for those of us, which is most of the people who support us, and probably most of you who are listening don't have a lot of money. But when we pool $5 a month and we all do that, then that's enough for us to continue to do the work and go strong. And so making sure that we're not just throwing it at candidates who are going to come and go and who aren't going to offer up half of the shit that they promise. So that's my appeal to you. And stay safe out there, everyone. Take care of each other, because like we've been saying, we maybe avoided military in the streets or something like that by a whisker, but we still have plenty of work to do, just as much work to do. In fact, this every passing day shows us that amount of work that we have to do. So we have to take care of each other and take care of ourselves, be there for each other, and keep on. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Alfonso, for engineering as always. Have a good weekend, Kevin.